When I think of a medieval tavern, I think of my video games. I think of D&D. I think of fantasy books. And honestly, it's probably a way too idolized version of it. Although, to be fair, I also think of Witcher, and I think Witcher did an okay job at portraying some of the elements of it. Anyway, YouTube, thanks for clicking and enjoy the reaction. I really, really, really like this channel, so I do recommend you check it out. If you haven't already, please. He's amazing. His content is really cool, and yeah, we have reacted before to other videos from this channel, so please check out Tasting History.
While a medieval tavern in a fantasy game might be where you'd go to receive a quest from a hooded stranger in the corner, in real life it was where you went to gamble, drink, and eat. Perhaps something like this bowl of beef pottage known as Bukanada. So thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video as we visit a medieval tavern, this time on Tasting History. So if you ever find yourself in the late medieval period and you are in need of food and drink, you better find yourself an inn, tavern, or alehouse. Now, all three of those are not exactly synonymous, and we'll talk about how they're different a little bit later. But in general, you should be able to go to any of them and get a drink and probably some food. Now, depending on the quality of the establishment, you might just be getting some bread and cheese. But if it's a reputable tavern,
oh my god, bread and cheese sounds amazing!
A bowl of pottage or stew. Now, some of these places might have what today is called a hunter's pot, or perpetual stew going. And this is the concept of always having a cauldron of stew or pottage going at all times, basically.
This was the part that I always found fascinating because it's portrayed and perpetuated, I think that's the word, in a lot of different books and a lot of different fantasy games, right? It's portrayed a lot that you always get a soup, right? Or a stew. And it was fascinating because I'm like, do people just always just assume that? But it makes sense, right? It would make sense, for example, how easy it would be to make a meal out of like potatoes.
You would take a bowl from it and then replace the ingredients that you just took out, so it's always replenishing itself. Even today, there are places that still practice this. There's a place in Japan who has been serving the same broth since 1945.
Man, I wish I wish I saw this video before I went to Japan. I could have gone there.
And in Perpignan, France, they served the same stew
this is
from
closer
the
to me.
15th century all the way up until World War II when they couldn't get the right ingredients.
Never mind.
And in the Middle Ages, getting the right ingredients would also influence what your stew would be. You might just get a vegetable pottage, and some places it would just be beans and cabbages, but some places it might be like a fish stew or something with really quality meat in it. One of the most common stews from this period, which I've found recipes for in pretty much every cooking manuscript from England and France from the Middle Ages, is called bukanada or bocanade. Take veal, kid, or hen, and boil them in fair water, or else in fresh broth, and smite them in pieces, and pick them clean. And then draw the same broth through a strainer, and cast thereto parsley, sage, hyssop, mace, cloves, and let it boil till the flesh be enough. Then set it from the fire, and thicken it up with raw yolks of egg, and cast thereto powdered ginger, verjuice, saffron, and salt, and then serve it forth for a good meat. I just find it so interesting that while the spellings have obviously changed, and they would have been pronounced quite differently back in the day, the words themselves, for the most part, are the same words that we would use today. Now, there are words like smite, which means to cut, but we don't usually use it in like recipes. It's more of a biblical cutting, I guess. Though maybe we should bring that back. In my next cookbook, I'm gonna get rid of the word cut and use to smite. Now, there are a few words in the original that we don't use at all in English today, like eieren, which was a Middle English word for eggs. Though eggs was also a Middle English word for eggs, and it is around the time of this recipe that we see one get picked over the other. In 1490, William Caxton translated Virgil's Aeneid into English, and he was frustrated with how the English language was changing at the time. He tells a story of a mercer or a cloth merchant named Sheffield, and he was from the north of England, and he finds himself in Kent, in the south of England. And he goes up to this woman and asks her for some eggs, and she says, "I don't know what you're saying, I don't speak French." Well, neither did he, because eggs is not a French word. But she didn't know the word eggs because she was from the South, and she said eren. Well, someone nearby overheard the confusion and said, ask for eren, and he got his eggs. But after telling this story, Caxton admits that he's also confused and finds consternation in these two different words meaning the same thing. And he writes, "Lo, what should a man in these days now write, eggus or eren? Certainly it is hard to please every man because of diversity and change of language."
Okay, I gotta ask you a question, Cha. Which one would you pick? Eren or Aegis? I think Eren is more airy. I don't know. It has less weight to it. So egg makes more sense because it's more weighted? If that makes sense. I don't know.
But the thing is, he picked one, and he picked eggs. And usually
that's the one
it
he
wouldn't
knew.
matter which one he picked in years before because he would
It's
write it down and
familiar,
a few
right?
people would read it. Great. But he was using a printing press. So thousands and thousands of these were going out. And so eggs became the word to use. And he did that with a lot of different words. He was the one that chose which version we use even to this day.
Can you imagine knowing that you were going to influence people that much? Damn, the power trip.
Anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
That was
On to the
really
recipe.
interesting,
So for this
honestly.
bukanada, what you'll need is 3 to 4 pounds or about 1.5 kilograms of beef, goat, or chicken with the bones.
I have some in
I'm
the
using
fridge.
beef. Originally it actually says veal, but I'm just using beef for this. Also, kid, in the recipe it says kid, that is goat. I'm always having people saying, it's children. No, it's not. It's goat. A small handful of parsley, a few leaves of sage, a few sprigs of fresh hyssop, a half teaspoon of mace, an 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, 4 egg yolks, a half teaspoon of ginger, a half cup or 120 milliliters of verjuice. So what exactly is,
verjuice
or verjuice? It was a medieval way of making juice from unripened grapes. And so it's not fermented or anything, but it does have this like vinegary kind of acidicness to it, but it's also sweet. So if you don't have it,
It's a
maybe
bit
like
line.
half grape juice and half red wine vinegar might mimic the flavor. Then a pinch of saffron threads ground up and a teaspoon of salt. So first, put your meat into a large pot and
that
cover
looks
it
so
with
nice
water
already.
or broth or a combination of the two.
makes me wanna make
And then
ramen.
bring this to a boil and reduce to a simmer. And make sure to skim off any scum or foam that forms on top. Simmer this for about an hour or until the meat easily comes away from the bone. And then take it off the heat, take the meat out, and go ahead and smite your meat.
Oh,
also,
my
the knife
God.
that I'm using is this honkin knife. It's a knife, which I'm now calling my smiting knife. This was made for me, handmade by one of my Patreon patrons, and it mimics an older design from like the early Renaissance, I believe.
That's
I
so
just think
cool!
it's so cool. So
That is so freaking cool! Okay, I'm gonna nerd a tiny bit about knives. I went to a blacksmithing course when I went to Japan, and I made my own knife. It was a really fun experience, and my knife is based on the design that I'm gonna be showing in my 3.0 design, so I can't show it yet. Plus, they still need to send it to me because they're making a custom handle. I didn't do the handle part, I just did the blade part. But it was so freaking cool to learn how to do all of that, and I want to go back and do their 6-day course instead. Yeah. I think it's fascinating to make your own knife. I don't know why, it's just so satisfying. It's really cool. Also, it's for like kitchen use, right? So I'm just like, yep, I'm just gonna make my own knives now. Yatta! Anyway, nerding done. Let's go back to the video.
put a link to, because he makes like hand-done knives. I'll put a link to his stuff.
But that's
Anyway,
so
this is now
cool.
my
Someone made
smiting
him
knife.
a knife.
So once your meat is smitten or smited, you'll want to strain the broth as much as you can until it's nice and clean. Then return the meat to the pot and add the broth back in. Add in the parsley, sage, and hyssop, all chopped very fine, as well as the mace and the cloves. Then stir everything together
Mace and
and
cloves is
bring
so
it to a simmer.
weird.
Then set the lid on the pot and let it simmer for an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours,
I don't
really,
think I've made
until the meat is as tender as you want it to get. Also keep an
stew
eye
with
on it because you
cloves
might need to
and
add some water in
ages?
case it all steams away, but that's why you want to leave the
a
lid
weird
on
taste.
as you do it. Anyway, while it cooks, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what else you might find in a medieval tavern.
Yeah! Yeah, a bard. It's time for the history part.
Befell that in that season on a day in Southwark at the tabard as I lay, ready to wend in on my pilgrimage to Canterbury with full devout courage. That was from the prologue of the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, and being written between 1387 and 1400, it contains one of the first references to a named inn, an actual historic inn. It was called the Tabard, and this is where, in the Canterbury Tales, all of the characters gather just before heading south to Canterbury on their pilgrimage, which is kind of the whole point of the work. Chaucer talks about the owner of this inn,
so there's like
and
a
says
big
that he
feast?
was a very good host. And to the supper he set us straight away. He served us with victuals of the best kind. Strong was the wine, and well pleased we were to drink. Now, when I picture this in my mind's eye, I'm definitely influenced by things like Lord of the Rings and Dungeons and Dragons and all of these kind of medieval fantasy worlds. But they aren't exactly like that. First of all, there are a lot fewer like orcs and elves. But also, the inns and taverns and alehouses of medieval England, at least, were not all the same. They were quite different, at least at different parts in their history. Now, of course, throughout time, their definitions overlapped, and there was a lot of variety within each classification. But in general, you had the inns at the top of the echelon. They tended to be the nicest, and then there were the taverns and then the alehouses at the bottom. The inns, how they started out at least, they were a place for people to stay the night. Usually they were kind of near the gatehouse of a city or a town, or else in between cities or towns, like a day's walk away, maybe 20 miles away. So it was a place that you could stop the night and stay.
It's fascinating to me that back then, right, you had the element of convenience. You still have that, like obviously you have the hotels that are near transportation or in airports or nearby. But for the most part, you would have thought that they would be a bit more inside so that there would be foot traffic going on for the shops.
And just like a bed and breakfast, they would often give you some food and drink. But only, just like a bed and breakfast, to the people who were actually staying there. You couldn't roll up, you weren't staying there, you roll up and you're like, I want some grub. That isn't how it happened. Though at times in history, inns found themselves making good money from the food and drink, and so they kind of said, all right, maybe we will just serve to anyone who comes up, and so it was like having a restaurant in a hotel, which is still a thing today. A tavern, on the other hand, was kind of the opposite. It was a place for people to come eat and drink, mainly drink, but it was not typically a place to stay. And be merry, yeah. Originally, taverns were places that served wine. They were run by vintners who made or imported wine. Wine? And remember, this is a time when wine was actually still being made in England. I think they do it again now, but they had quite a bit of wine being made in England, but it was mostly made by the church, and they kept it all for themselves, for, I'm assuming, communion. So anyone else was having to get imported wine, which was a lot more expensive. The most common wine in England at the time was a red wine from Gascony that cost about 3 pennies a gallon. Twice as much as the very best ale. Then there was Rhenish wine from the Rhine region, which cost 6 to 8 pennies a gallon. Now, if you're paying this much for your wine, you want to make sure that you're getting actually what you paid for. So if there's any question, you can ask the taverner to let you down into the cellar to see the actual barrel that your wine is coming from. If the taverner was found to be selling adulterated or counterfeit wine, they would often be punished by being put in the pillory or the stocks and having that offending wine poured over their head, public humiliation. But they would also usually get kicked out of the guild, which basically meant that they lost their business. There were actually people whose job it was to go around and inspect the wine. And it was more popular in France than in England, but these people were usually the town crier, and they would do this kind of as part of their job and be called the wine crier.
Wait. So are these like the people that are the first version of the food reviewers? People that just go and check the quality of your food and then they write up the review of like how your place is, your establishment is. Is this like the first concept of it?
In the 11th century, there was a French writer who said, "Wine criers cry with open mouth the wine which is for sale in the taverns at 4 farthings." Now, some of these taverns were selling the best wine, and some were selling the worst wine, and everything in between. There was a lot of variety. In London alone, in 1309, there were 354 different taverns. So lots of variety.
300?
And with a population of only 80,000 people, that's like one tavern for every 225 people. So business was booming. It's probably why they started eventually selling other drinks commonly, like cider from apples and perry from pears, especially in the West Country, and then mead, which is made from honey. Often that was more expensive and kind of kept for special occasions, but I'm sure you could find different versions all over. Also, I found a mead that I really like. It's called Odin's Skull. It's not so sweet and kind of has a little spice to it. I'll put a link in the description. It's really, really good. If you like mead, I should do another mead video, because there are a lot of old mead recipes I need to cover. More mead, maybe coming up. Anyway, these taverns, along with all these different drinks that they were now selling, would often start to sell food, and some would even have a room or two to let up, like on the second or third floor of the building. So you can see that the lines between the definitions are already getting blurred. Also, these rooms, you didn't get like a room to yourself.
Oh my.
They usually would house like 10 or 12 different people who didn't know each other. It was like mash as many people into these rooms as possible. If there was a bed, again, lots of people sleeping in the same bed, so it ain't the Holiday Inn. Now, the least extravagant.
Real? Damn, I thought they had like separate rooms and stuff. Not for maybe everyone, but at least beds? You just like crammed up together for cheap? Wow. I'm color me surprised, I guess.
Again, of the three places to get drinks, and there were more places you could get drinks but that we're covering, were the ale houses. And when they started out, they were just that. It was a private house where the wife in the house was selling ale. Because she would make a big batch of ale, but ale back then, especially before hops, would only last a day, 2, maybe 3. And so anything that the family couldn't drink themselves, she would sell to everyone else. And so she would stick a stick or a broom outside of the door, and that was the signal letting everyone know that there was ale for sale. Eventually, these places too would serve some food. I
wonder how that started.
Typically, it wasn't the highest quality or as varied a menu. You'd probably get some bread and cheese, maybe a meat pie.
I still want bread and cheese.
Just because these ale houses were less official than taverns and inns, that doesn't mean that it was just a free-for-all. They were...
Ooh, by the way, if any of you watching are from Europe, recommend me cheese. Thanks.
Still controlled. They had to sell quality ale. In fact, in some ways, it was even more controlled because ale was such a staple of the people's diet. It was a major form of calories for many people. In 1266, the excise of bread and ale went into effect, and this tied the price of ale and of bread to the price of wheat. And just like there were the wine criers, there were ale conners who would go around to test the ale and make sure everything was on the up and up. They were sworn to examine and assay the beer and ale, and to take care that they were good and wholesome, and sold at proper prices according to the assize, and also to present all defaults of brewers to the next court leet. A male baker or brewer who failed to adhere to these new laws ought to undergo the judgment of the pillory without any redemption of money. Likewise, the woman brewer shall be punished by the trumbrel, trebuchet, or castigatory if she offends divers times and will not amend. That is to say, if an alewife flouts the law over and over and doesn't change her ways, then she's going to be punished. And the punishments are all forms of a public humiliation. Though I had to kind of look into trebuchet because I think of a trebuchet and I'm like, are they flinging these poor women into like the walls of castles?
That's what I'm thinking.
It turns out there are smaller versions of trebuchets that were used just for dunking people into the river, and that's what it was. They weren't trebucheting women across the field. Anyway, if you are visiting an ale house or a tavern or an inn, you'll want to take it easy. Don't go overboard on either the food or the drink, or else you might end up like poor Osbert of Elstow. The Bedfordshire Coroner's Roll of 1276 tells us what happened to poor Osbert after he left a tavern. About midnight on 17th May, Osbert Lewile, son of William Christmas of Elstow, who was drunk and disgustingly overfed, came from Bedford toward his house. When he arrived at his house, he had the falling sickness, fell upon a stone on the right side of his head, breaking the whole of his head, and died by misadventure.
I love the fact that how they call someone just getting dizzy or fainting the falling sickness. Breaking the whole of his head is crazy exaggeration, I think.
And while died by misadventure may sound cool, I assure you it is not. And it seems that
bleeding out on the street doesn't sound good.
was an ongoing problem and often ended in your demise. In another coroner's roll from 1272, it says that Ralph, son of Ralph, left a tavern and was accosted by 4 men: Robert Bernard of Wooton, Robert of Shefford, Richard Norman, and Roger Brienne. I love that every person in this story has a first name that starts with the letter R. Even the tavern that Ralph was drinking at was owned by Robert Mallon. Anyway, these 4 men, Robert, Richard, and Roger, ask Ralph if he is drunk, and he is, and so he drunkenly says, "Who are you?" And in response, because he was drunk, Robert sprang forward and struck Ralph across the crown of his head with a spart axe.
Why?
So that blood and brains immediately flowed out. He immediately lost his speech and died thereof about midday on the morrow.
Why?
The thing is, these ruffians who accosted Ralph are the exact type of people who would often be in the taverns themselves. I mean, there were those upscale establishments, of course, but most, it seems, at least that got written about, were dens of scum and villainy that were filled with gambling, drinking, and prostitution. But even with such a terrible reputation, it seems that pretty much everybody found themselves in a tavern at one point or another, even the clergy. But that was quite frowned upon, as can be seen in this letter from around the year 1200. An archdeacon to a rural dean, greetings. We have been given to understand that chaplains in your deanery live in less than upright fashion, for they go to taverns, as we have heard, where they have inappropriate and illicit association with lay people, with the result that those who say priests are no different from lay people are justified. In order that in the future it cannot be said that, as a result of your laziness, such chaplains have been found in your deanery, bestir yourself to correct these matters. Another letter I found shows that whether
he got scolded in such a polite manner, but damn, the sternness, you could feel it.
Whether you're a layperson or a clergyman, going and gambling at these taverns often led to ruin. In this letter, a man has lent the friend of a friend some money, and now he is asking the friend to pay him that money back. And the friend is like, no. I do not wish to lend him anything of mine, for he is an inveterate dice player, and he loses everything that he gambles. Those who were with him in the tavern when he lost X and his pledges, they gained everything, right down to his drawers. So take care that you refrain from handing over any more of your own money, which you borrowed from me, and so lose on him what you ought to repay me. So should you find yourself in medieval England, maybe stay away from any taverns or inns that seem a little dodgy. I'm hoping that I have found an upstanding inn in the Porch House in Stow-on-the-Wold, which I just booked several nights at when I'm going to England in June. Very, very excited. Now, they actually claim to be the oldest inn in England, dating from the year 947, though there are numerous places that make very similar claims, so it's hard to tell
Marketing, am I right?
exactly what they mean. There's a wonderful video by one of my favorite creators, Jay Draper. I'll put her stuff in the description. She's great. And she talks about how a lot of places are England's oldest pub or England's oldest inn, and it often has to do with, like, there is one stone that was here in 1450 and the rest of the place is new. It's like, you know, the pub of Theseus.
Yeah.
But sometimes also
Makes sense.
like, yes, in 900 there was definitely an inn here, and there's an inn here now, but, you know, here it was like a dentist's office, and here was a bank, and, you know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm still really, really excited to go. And perhaps, if I can convince them to really lean into their medieval pedigree and make some bukanada, like the one that I'm about to eat. So as soon as the meat is nice and tender, take it off the heat, and then it is time to add the egg yolks.
Oh yeah, this is a cooking video, I forgot. Honestly, I've been enjoying the history part so much in this video that my mind didn't even think about the food, except the cheese and the bread, which I'm gonna get after this video. It's instilled in my brain right now. I'm like, I need to go nibble on some cheese.
Now, if you just add the egg yolks right now, they're gonna scramble and it's gonna be unpleasant. So
unpleasant? But that's like a legit tactic for a bunch of stews, where you slowly pour it in and you whisk it with the stew already so it gets cooked and you have like a bunch of strings. Though I guess that's also preference.
What you need to do is let the broth cool down just a little bit, and then take a little of that broth and slowly add it into the egg yolks as you're whisking, and they will start to warm up. Keep doing this until you've added about a half cup of the broth, and then whisk in the ginger and the saffron and the salt, and then you can add that to the stew. Finally, add in the verjus, and it is ready to go.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't make stringy at all.
A bukanada fit for a medieval tavern.
I say that, but like looking at the meat itself, you can see the stringiness on it. Huh. Interesting. Also, that bread. Can we just talk about that bread for a second? Like, oh baby, that bread looks really good.
So you want to add those egg yolks in like last thing before you serve it, because if you ever have to reheat it, they do tend to scramble a little bit. So they go from thickening it to scrambled. The taste is going to be the same, but the look is a little different, and I did just have to reheat mine, unfortunately. Doesn't matter. Here we go. The thing is, smells wonderful. The saffron is what hits me. I was worried it was going to be the clove, because that's what was hitting me at the beginning, but now it's the saffron. Here we go.
Interesting. I would have thought it's still the clove. I like the tavern music he put on the background.
That's really good. That is so interesting, because you get those medieval flavors that you would never find in a modern beef stew. Like the saffron, like the cloves, like the mace, like verjus, which adds this kind of biting acidity without being super acidic, because a lot of medieval dishes will actually just add vinegar, and that is the flavor that you get. This is different. There's more of a sweetness to it. Really, really nice, and the meat just falls apart. Anyway, if you do want to make this, or if I can get that in England to make it, then I will point you toward the Tasting History website, tastinghistory.com, which I made with help from Squarespace, who is today's sponsor. Squarespace makes building a website so easy with their dynamic tools like their drag and drop technology for both desktop and for mobile. And if you are not a web designer yourself, then you can really lean into their wonderful templates, which kind of lay everything out for you and give you a great starting place. They also help make sure that your website is easily viewed both on a desktop and on a mobile phone. Squarespace also has the ability to create email campaigns to keep in contact with your subscribers, and if you're selling products, to keep customers apprised of new items or whenever things go on sale. So if you're looking to make a new website, go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, just go to squarespace.com/tastinghistory and you'll get 10% off of your first purchase of a website or domain.
Why is it medieval cheesecake that comes up? I say I want cheese, and it's just like, yeah, cheesecake. That's not the type of cheese that I want right now, but that looks really freaking delicious as well. Oh, I love this channel.
See you next time on Tasting History.
All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being here. I'm gonna go and eat some cheese with bread. I appreciate you hanging out until the very end. I haven't said it enough. I love this channel, so hopefully we can do some more reacts. We can watch some more videos together. I appreciate you. Thanks for staying until the end. See you next time. And yeah, let me know what type of cheese you like or you think I should try. I'm always on the lookout for more cheese. I like cheese. Cheese is great. You can't tell by my reaction to this video at all, right? Okay, see you next time. Bye-bye!